It's the bomb, baby. The bomb, baby. With no ifs, no ands, no buts, and no maybes. It's the bomb, baby. The bomb, baby. With no ifs, no ands, no buts, and no maybes. It's the bomb, baby. The bomb, baby. With no ifs, no ands, no buts, and no maybes. It's the bomb, baby. The bomb, baby. With no ifs, no ands, no buts, and no maybes.
Welcome to the Fantasy Bomb. We are back in action. It's been a short little hiatus for us, but luckily we're back to talk some more football. Fresh off of FSTA, the Fantasy Sports Trade Association Conference, and expert drafts, which we're going to break down today. And before we get into that, we have a little setup here that's different. So I don't think anybody's going to want to be watching this just because this is an experimental day after some back and forth with YouTube, and now we're trying a new setup. And it doesn't really matter because you're probably just listening to this anyways. But pretty soon we'll be streaming all over the place. Lucky you. Those of us who do wind up seeing us, probably just our wife and kids and close relatives. Um, I'm Pierre Camus, host of the Fantasy Bomb, editor of Rotoballer NFL MLB. With me is my co-host, and that is Chris Mangano. Chris, it's been a while. Haven't talked to you in a few days, and haven't seen you even longer. So after all this time, I really need to know what's going on.
Pretty much the same old, except maybe you can hear it in my voice. I came down with a little head cold here, so I'm kind of congested and stuffed up. I'm going to do my best here. Hopefully, I don't sniffle too many times or cough too many times during the broadcast. But other than that, I'm good. Just same old.
Rolling with the punches, huh? All right. Well, that's good.
The big news is from your side.
For me, why was there news I
Well,
don't know about?
well, yeah. Well, you know about it. I hope you were there. You got to attend the FSTA, which is pretty cool.
I did. Very, very lucky, very honored to be able to go my first time. And so the guys at Rotoballer, who are beyond awesome, Alex and Leo, and of course Raph, you guys know Raphstradamus from the radio. I got to meet them in person, which was by itself just enough. That was really the big takeaway is just how great the guys are. Hung out for a little while, and wound up meeting some people that I only knew from Twitter or online TV even. And so I did meet Scott Fish, and we've just last show, right? We broke down the Fishbowl. You and I are both taking part in Fishbowl 8, talked about our strategies, what we're going to do. Huge expert league, also with some fans involved. I think it's 900 teams. And he's the organizer. He's now with Fanball. So I got to meet Scott a couple of occasions. Great guy. Not surprisingly, he's just as nice in person as he is online. And I did say what up to Matthew Berry. It was a little brief encounter, and he was hanging out in the lobby, and I said, well, why not? So I said hi to him. I think probably there's a 0.1% chance he remembers who I am. Um, let's see who else. Brandon Marianne Lee, Fancy Alarm, saw Ray Flowers, made some eye contact. Yeah, just some of those people on the radio on Sirius XM, people that you see online. Met several people. Everybody was nice. Everybody was awesome. So it was really a good time. I learned a lot, kind of where the industry's headed. I'm not going to get into all that today, but yeah, it was great. It was awesome. The weather was good. Here it's about 158 degrees in South Texas, which I love. We talked about that. I love the heat. It was a balmy 70, 72, and kind of cloudy, so easy to walk around. But yeah, it was awesome. I have nothing bad to say about the trip.
Good for you.
So, um, but anyways, coming off of that, the one thing actually that I kind of regret, actually, there's one bad thing I could say about the trip is I had to spend the night in the Dallas airport on the way back because our flight was delayed like 5 hours. Believe it or not, it's because they had to change a tire. Have you ever been delayed because they had to change a tire on an airplane?
No, but it's funny. The only, like, maybe it's ironic, but the only time in my life I've ever had to spend the night, like where I've gotten stuck in a plane, had to spend the night, was also in Dallas. So there must be something about Dallas. Like, don't have a layover in Dallas is basically. And I've heard of a few
Well,
people that have had similar situations, and it's always Dallas. So I guess when I'm like booking a flight, if I have a layover and it's Dallas, I'm kind of like, kind Can I find another one?
Well, that's the thing is San Antonio actually it's a big city, but it's a small airport. You wouldn't believe how small it is compared to the size. And you have to connect going anywhere. There's like no direct flights. You always have to go out of Houston or Dallas. And so we kind of have no choice. And usually it's Dallas if you're going up north somewhere. Luckily, the Dallas airport is pretty nice. Of course, when you're there, like at 2 in the morning, there's nothing except for one thing. My savior, my shining light, is Dunkin' Donuts. So thank God there was a Dunkin' Donuts open. We had some coffee, had some donuts. The guy was nice. He gave us a free jelly donut because he felt bad for us. So that was pretty good.
But yeah, I just thought about how far are you from Dallas Airport?
Oh, from Dallas to San Antonio, like you could this amount of time we spent sitting there at the airport, we could have driven and gotten there sooner because it's like a 5 hour drive, and it's a
Oh,
1 hour flight. But of course, we didn't have a car there, and we couldn't even if we wanted to. All the rental cars, all the hotels were booked for some reason, so we couldn't have even rented a car. Not that we would have, but yeah, it's just a
this
mess.
was on the way home or the way there?
On the way home. On the way there, my point was I actually had a point. On the way there, we were also delayed because of weather because we had a connecting flight out of Philly, and so we didn't arrive until 7 o'clock that night. So I came in right after the Expert League's drafts finished. So I didn't get to watch it. Not that I was in it, of course. I wasn't one of the participants, but I didn't get to watch. But I was lucky enough to get to talk about it with Raf on the air on Wednesday, I think it was. Getting my days mixed up. And so I did see some of the action there, met some of the people, and so we're gonna break it down. We're gonna talk about both the A. I didn't realize there's an A league and a B league, so we're gonna talk about both of those. So Chris, you get a chance to check out those big boards.
Yes, I did.
All right, we're gonna put them up for you people, and we're gonna see what we have here: A league and B league. So, as far as how you get up, now this is sort of like in soccer or I should say football, where some of those leagues where you can actually move up or down depending on how you finish in the standings. So, here we go. So, the people who are in the A League, let me just mention some of the names. Tim Jensen from RT Sports, super nice guy. Spent almost an hour talking to him. Ian Allen actually was just inducted to the Fantasy Hall of Fame. Apparently, every year there's one person, just one, that gets inducted to the Fantasy Hall of Fame, and this was his year. So I was lucky enough to be there. Actually, I was talking to Tim while the induction ceremony was going on for Ian. So we have Charlie Wiegert. We have from Big Game Software, if I can see here, Brett Baker and Tate Ward. Greg Ambrosius, met him also, super nice guy, involved with MFL 10s. We've talked MFL 10s as far as fanball with Scott Fish. Greg is also heavily involved there, and Tom Kesnick. You can see moving on here, we have Mark Zwillinger, Steve Gardner, and Howard Carmen from USA Today. Nando Delfino, super nice guy too. Chris Liss was supposed to take him on in ping pong, and that didn't happen. They wound up going somewhere else that night, but I almost had a face off in ping pong with Chris Liss. Ray Flowers, Rick Wolf, and Glenn Colton. As you can see here going on here, Ryan Bonini, Corey Bonini, Mike Clay. Didn't get to see him in person. I kind of saw him from a distance there. And then I did get to meet Mr. Howard Bender. Just a great guy too. And it's funny because, we'd say this also of our own Raf, Real Talk Raf. Such a big personality, and someone who's just got almost kind of a little bit of attitude, when they're on the air, but in person, just the nicest guy, kind of like a big teddy bear type. You talk about that stereotype. That's exactly what it is. So, anyways, let's jump into the football here. So, Chris, what I want to do, instead of just talking about, here's what happened round one, here's the player that got taken, what do you think? Let's look team by team, and we're not going to go through every team, of course, but what I want you to do is talk to me about strategies that you think that these teams took on, because I have the feeling that as far as an expert league, they didn't just go blindly in and say, okay, who's the best player available now? Who's the best player available now? There's guys who are going to go zero RB. There's guys who are going to load up on run back heavy. There's people who like to wait on quarterback. So I want you to go kind of team by team and point out anything that you think stands out as far as strategy you like, you thought was interesting, or you just have a big question about. So first, let me ask you this: what stands out to you when you see this big board as far as these experts go?
Well, the first thing that stood out to me was that Saquon Barkley went ahead of Antonio Brown.
That is
Even
interesting.
even Alvin Kamara went ahead of Antonio Brown. But I mean, I guess I could see an argument for Kamara, but Saquon over Antonio Brown is really shocking to me. Um, and I don't. This just seems to be the trend this year, and this expert draft seems to show it that running backs are really going early and often. The only team that even came kind of close to a zero RB draft would be Mike Clay's team. He took three wide receivers and a tight end in the first four picks, but even that technically is not, by the true definition of zero RB, it's not quite zero RB, but it's the closest anybody came into this. Um, the only other one that was even close was your ping pong nemesis Chris Liss. He started three wide receivers, but then he started grabbing running backs after that. So I don't know. This is what I'm seeing in best ball drafts is pretty much everywhere. Is running backs are really a premium, and they're going early and often, and that seems to be the case here.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then: do you think that kind of the era of the zero RB is dead? As this is showing us, again, these are the experts here. These are the best and brightest of the industry. And you see Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Odell Beckham, they went three in a row. But again, after a rookie like Saquon Barkley, after someone like Kamara, who we keep talking is due for regression, possibly nobody taken in the first half of the draft that wasn't a running back. And then if you keep going, first and second round, all those top running backs, you have the top six, of course, and then you have Hunt, Gordon, Fournette, Cook. You have 13 running backs taken in the first 21 picks. So, is anybody going zero RB at all these days?
Um, Probably not, but I mean, if there's a year to do it, this is probably the year, right? Because you're getting such amazing value. I mean, look at what Mike Clay did. He started Julio Jones, Keenan Allen from the 11 spot. He could potentially be sitting on two top five wide receivers in a PPR format, right? That's not even like a stretch that he could have two top five players at the wide receiver position. You're not going to be able to do that at running back unless you get really lucky. I mean, even somebody like Howard Bender who took Leonard Fournette and Dalvin Cook, it's unlikely it could happen, but it's unlikely either of those guys finish in the top five, right? So if there's a year to do zero RB, this is probably the year because there's just some amazing wide receiver value early in the draft. And then what you're seeing is because people are going so running back heavy early, is you get these kind of like satellite type backs, these like Duke Johnson, Tarek Cohen's, Chris Thompson, these kind of guys falling to like those sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth rounds. And you can even get kind of like those plotter two down backs like CJ Anderson, Isaiah Crowell, um, possibly Marlon Mack in those later rounds too. So I think if there's a year, the last couple of years, zero RB was more popular and it actually made zero RB more difficult, right? Because if everybody, if you've got Antonio Brown going number one, like there was that one year where I think the top three off the board was Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, and Odell Beckham. I think that was a couple of years ago, right? When zero running back was kind of like peak popularity. You're not going to get as much value when the first three wide receivers are gone in the first three picks. But here, you're not seeing Antonio Brown didn't even go till pick seven. That's just incredible value, right? For a guy who just consistently finishes post top 5, 3, 2, whatever PPR numbers year after year after year. So I think if there's a year to do it, this is probably the year. And especially in a more casual league, which is probably what, the majority of this is an expert league, but in a more casual league where people tend to think more like, oh, I have to have a running back, right? I got to get one of those running backs. I would be surprised if in some of my more casual leagues, I'm seeing Antonio Brown lasting till pick 9 or 10, or maybe even beyond. Guys they just have to get those running backs. So this could be the year where zero RB really like kind of reasserts itself as a popular strategy.
Yeah, and that's a good point because again, looking at this expert league, how can you kind of extrapolate from this and take it away to your home league? Where you have guys, like, you know, Uncle Joe who is like looking through the magazine and I heard that that Tom Brady he's still pretty good, right? You're not too worried about a strategy necessarily, but as far as can you do to build the best possible team, or if you're in a, let's say a league, kind of a long time league. I'm in a couple of these, right? Guys who aren't quote unquote experts, right? They're not writers, they're not analysts, they're just guys I played with, but I've been playing with them for over 10 years, and they know what they're doing, right? These guys are hungry and they want to win just like anybody else, and they're active on the waiver wire just like any of my expert leagues, and so I can't get anything past them. So I have to use the edge, all the knowledge I have to try to win. Um, those leagues, I have a feeling you're right. I think the Kareem Hunts, the Leonard Fournettes, I think they're going automatic first round. I think the receiver's going to get pushed back. Now, is Antonio Brown going to be available like, pick 10 or after? I don't think so. I think this is probably about the latest you'll see those receivers go. I think the guy who could slip the most is Hopkins, just because some people are going to think, he'll go back to earth a little bit, maybe not fully trusting Watson, whatever it is. So, anyways, we did have two guys. So Chris Liss and Mike Clay went receiver the first three picks, each of them. Which of those teams do you like better if you had to choose? Would you rather have ODB, Mike Evans, and T.Y. Hilton, or Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, and Stephon Diggs? Which of those trios, if you are going zero RB, especially if you're in a league like this with a bunch of sharks, which of those would you prefer?
I'd prefer Clay's trio as much as I like Odell Beckham. Again, Evans, I like Evans. I like Evans this year, but he's going to need touchdowns probably if he's going to emerge as a wide receiver one, a consistent week in, week out wide receiver one. He's probably going to need to positively regress in touchdowns, which I think he can do. But you're talking about a little concern there. And T.Y. Hilton, I mean, he could be a steal in the third round, but if Andrew Luck isn't ready, or if Andrew Luck misses half the season, or if Andrew Luck never comes back, that's not going to be, end up being a great pick. Whereas, like I said, Julio Jones and Keenan Allen, I mean, Julio Jones, we know what Julio Jones could do. We've seen it year after year after year. Even last year, and everybody was so down on Julio Jones, I think he was still wide receiver 6 or 7, something like that, with only 3 touchdowns. And Keenan Allen, I mean, he's got all the opportunity in the world this year with no Hunter Henry there. He could just be a target machine. We've already talked about, I talked about it a few weeks ago on our pod that I think he could lead the league in both targets and receptions this year. So, again, you're talking about potentially having 2 top 5 PPR wide receivers. And then Diggs is a great kind of, he's got that high ceiling. Doesn't always give you those great floor weeks, but with Julio and Keenan Allen, that's okay, right? You can handle that kind of risk because you've already got 2 guys that typically are going to give you solid points week in and week out. And just Stephon Diggs now just makes your team ceiling huge. So I like that start for Clay a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Chris's team, Chris Liss here, got a very high ceiling, but there's just a lot of risk there. Evans, of course, now with Winston being suspended 3 games, who knows how he's going to respond. And then T.Y. Hilton, you're totally dependent on the luck of, I'm sorry, pun intended, the luck of their quarterback, Andrew Luck. And one thing I have to relay is that on the day of the draft, Raph told me the story. He actually picked, as we go to the B League draft in a few minutes here, he took Andrew Luck as his first quarterback. And Tracy Hankin, who works with Inside Injuries, that's the name of the site, Inside Injuries, so I think she would know. She said that he was he hadn't even made the pick yet. He was about to select Andrew Luck, and he looked over, and he could feel her staring, and she's going like this, like, don't do it. And he picked him anyways. We'll definitely rag on him for that later. But yeah, she relayed to us later that there's absolutely zero confidence. Not that he's not going to play at all this year, but as far as taking him as your starting quarterback, you're rolling the dice quite a bit. So that also goes with Hilton and the rest of the team, doesn't it? You're counting him to be a wide receiver 1. He was not that last year. So third round, I don't know. We'll see. Okay, talk to me about Colton and the Wolfman's team here. Went the opposite, RB heavy. So you got Melvin Gordon, and then that was the 11th pick overall. On the turn, Jerick McKinnon, a guy we both like, as your RB2. That's pretty solid. And then third round, taking Alex Collins. And that's a guy that I know a lot of people think he could be an RB2, kind of on the higher end. So they took 2 of those guys that are kind of the popular running back sleepers and waited to take a receiver until round 4, wound up with Michael Crabtree, as their top receiver, and then went three receivers straight: Corey Davis and then Devontae Parker, who I will spend no time talking about. So, what do you think about that makeup of that team? You got Gordon, McKinnon, Collins, and then Crabtree, Davis, Parker.
I mean, that's not a team that I would personally be drafting. Um, I love McKinnon, but there's a lot of risk there, of course. And same with Alex Collins. I think in a redraft league, I tend to ignore ADP for the most part. I mean, not completely. If there's a guy that I know is going in the 10th round, and I really like him, I'm not going to grab him in the 4th or 5th, but I might grab him in the 7th or 8th just to make sure I get him, right? Or anywhere, right? If there's a guy I really like in a redraft league, where it's like either I get him right, because the problem in my best ball leagues where I'm doing so many leagues, I know I'm going to have, if there's a guy I like in the 10th round, I know I'm going to get him, at least a few times in the 10th round. So I'll have exposure to him. But in a redraft league, you only have one chance on the draft, right? That's it. This is your one chance. So, if there's a guy you want and you're like, well, he's a 10th rounder, I'm going to try to wait and sneak him into the 10th round. And then somebody grabs him ahead of you, you're going to be upset, right? That you didn't get him. So I have no problem reaching for guys in a redraft format. But Alex Collins in the third, I mean, you got to be really high on Alex Collins if you're drafting him in the third round, in my opinion, especially when it leaves you with, your top three wide receivers as Michael Crabtree, Corey Davis, and Devontae Parker. Now, I like Crabtree and I like Corey Davis, but they could bomb, right? You got Michael Crabtree with Joe Flacco, who hasn't done anything, hasn't really pumped out a good wide receiver since Steve Smith, fantasy wise at least. And you got Corey Davis, who, he's got a lot of potential there for sure, but he's coming into a sophomore season. Sometimes these guys take, 3 or 4 years before they finally break out. So there's no guarantee there. So you could be, and then Devontae Parker. I mean, everybody keeps saying this is the year of Devontae Parker, but I'll see it when I believe it. You could potentially, have nothing, not have one top 24 receiver out of that group, realistically. So yeah, I think that's a little risky there. I think he probably could have gone. They probably could have gone wide receiver instead of Collins and still gotten Collins when it came back around in round 4. But you never know. Again, this is an expert league, so Alex Collins. In your casual home league, most people might not even think about taking Alex Collins, right? Because they're like Alex Collins, whatever. But in an expert league, nothing's going to get by these guys. So you definitely, if he's your guy, you got to get him.
Yeah, okay, so my take is I have no problem taking Collins in the third round if you believe in him as a sleeper and you like him, let's say instead of Geis, or Henry, and I actually would take Collins ahead of those two guys. Um, I'm fine with that, and then going three receivers in a row after that, I think that's okay. To me, it's just Crabtree. I mean, obviously they see something that they believe that he's going to be worthy of that slot. I'm just surprised to see him ahead of like Brandon Cooks. Like on paper, you would expect Cooks to be the guy who would go there. Or somebody maybe a little even safer like Pierre Garcon. He's not going to get a ton of targets, but at least he's got a pretty high floor. Devin Funchess even. So I'm just surprised that Crabtree was the pick there. I love Corey Davis this year. I think that's a smart pick. Do not like Devontae Parker. Like I would at that point rather had one of the other guys that like Chris Hogan at that spot, Jamison Crowder even. But yeah, just Crabtree there. That's what surprises me the most. And there were some good running backs left. So had they gone with a different receiver, somebody like, well, for example, they could have taken Stephon Diggs, right, or Alshon Jeffrey. So a true actual wide receiver one, at least for fantasy purposes, a potential low end wide receiver one. Um, and then look, they could have waited and then taken J.J. Okay, let's say you don't like a J. Geis might have been available. Who knows? But anyways, slight surprise there. But you know what? I guess they like the Ravens, huh? Got Collins and Crabtree. That must be what it comes down to. So tell me now, as far as the other teams go, more balanced. We see pretty much a good mix. A lot of people went running back early and then bounced out with receivers. Some tight ends went kind of as we would expect. Gronk was a second rounder, Kelson the third, Ertz and Graham in the fourth, and then the next one was round 6, Rick Olson. Quarterbacks, same thing. Aaron Rodgers was a fourth rounder at the end. Then you see Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson. No other quarterback outside of those three taken until round 7. So really no shocks there either. who do you think achieved the best balance? Like, in other words, if you had to pick, without picking, so we're not going to pick a favorite, but if you had to pick a favorite, which team do you like the best? Like, if you had to inherit one of those teams, one of these experts, like, you know what, I don't have time for this. You know, Chris Mangano, you take my team and you run it to represent my website. Which team would you pick?
Well, me personally, I'm going to take Mike Clay's team because I'm like I've said in the past, I'm very comfortable playing with a team like that. I'm very comfortable playing with a team that's where I'm set at wide receiver and I'm set at tight end. But with Zach Ertz, I'm probably set at tight end. You never know, but I'm set at tight end, barring an injury. And basically, I can just try to manufacture two running backs every week. Whether it's Marshawn Lynch, who I actually really like this year. I think he has the potential. I mean, I don't see him as like a top 12 running back, but I think he'd be a solid 15 to 20 guy. RB 15 to 20. Because really, who else is gonna? Doug Martin gonna get the ball? Jalen Richard. I don't even know if Jalen Richard still there. Is DeAndre Washington? Are they still even on the team? I don't even know. Which is bad. I probably should know that. But I think he's you're looking at a guy who's probably going to get about 15 touches every week, and one or two goal line carries most weeks if they get down there, or when they do get down there, he's probably getting the ball. And then you got guys like Duke Johnson, who we know in a PPR format can give you those solid, RB2 flex type numbers. You got Kerryon Johnson, who has a lot of potential there in Detroit. And if he ends up taking over that job and actually being a good running back for them, he could really be loaded. Not as high on necessarily on Booker and Wilkins, but they have potential. And I also like Latavius Murray late there because we saw last year, as much as I like Dalvin Cook this year, he's coming off an ACL injury. He's dealt with injuries in college. If he goes down again, you're inheriting, an early down, every down type running back. And there's no McKinnon this year to take things away. I mean, who else is there is going to take from Murray? Murray could even have value with Cook in the lineup because he could get goal line chances. I mean, Cook isn't going to get every single running back touch. So that's a team to me that I would like to play. That's a team that I would like to have because I feel like all I'm really doing all year is I'm trying to improve my running back position. That's all I'm doing the whole year. I'm just trying to improve a running back, trying to improve. Whereas everybody else is like, yeah, I need a wide receiver 3 and a running back 2, or I need this, or I need a tight end. I need, you know what I mean? They're having to try to improve many positions. I'm set theoretically at wide receiver and tight end, and I'm fine with whatever Mahomes and Trubisky. I can figure it out. I can grab a QB off waiver. QB is so deep this year that not worried about that. So for me, it's just like, okay, try to find 2 running backs every week, play the waivers, maybe work some trades, whatever I got to do. So personally, that's the team I would want to take over.
Yeah, and as far as Latavius Murray, we've mentioned him before in the context of MFL tens as a really great pick because, like you said, that injury happens. He's the guy. He's not splitting time with McKinnon anymore. He's the guy. So if anything, more upside than last year. Now, of course, you're not going to count on an injury, but still, you could see some goal line work. So yeah, I really like him as kind of a late round. I wouldn't even say handcuff because you don't have to own Cook to own him, but kind of a little hedge bet there. And I was going to ask you, you answered my question. So you're comfortable with Marshawn Lynch as your RB1, the way you see it. That it doesn't matter who's RB1, RB2. You're mixing and matching each week. So if Lynch flops or whatever, you're still okay picking one of those guys. Let's say Devontae Booker gets the starting job, or Kerryon Johnson. Maybe he has a big workload. Maybe Jordan Wilkins becomes the man in Indy. So you're not too
Yeah,
worried about it.
that's the other thing people don't realize. If you take Saquon Barkley ahead of Antonio Brown, let's say, right? He's he's your guy, right? He's your guy. You're like saying, and I like Saquon Barkley this year. Don't get me wrong. I like Saquon Barkley. And I think he's gonna have a great year. But he's your guy. He's your horse. He's the guy that's carrying you, right? Let's say some team this year ends up being, just a run stopping force. Like they have some team. It happens every year, right? Like the Jaguars, you couldn't throw against the Jaguars last year. Let's say some team, their defense becomes just like no team can run the ball against this team. And Saquon Barkley is playing that team. You have to roll with Saquon Barkley. You just have to. He's your first round pick. You can't bench him. He might go out there and do nothing. He might get the ball 15 times and get 25 yards, right? Because he just gets shut down the whole game. Whereas if I have Marshawn Lynch and he's playing that same team, I easily sit Marshawn Lynch. I'm like, no big deal. I took you in the fifth round, right? Sit on my bench and I'll play Duke Johnson and carry on Johnson this week or whoever it might be, right? Because but again, I've got Julio Jones and Keenan Allen who are carrying me every week, and receivers don't seem to be, yeah, there was the Jacksonville effect last year, but other than that, it's very rare that there's matchups where the receivers can completely get shut down because receivers can be moved all around the field, right? Like you can move them into the slot, you can move them to the other side, and teams don't always shadow. Like very few teams actually have a cornerback that just shadows and will just follow them everywhere they go. So even though, yeah, Julio Jones or Keenan Allen might have tough matchups, the Falcons or the Chargers can move them around, and they do, to get them better matchups. Where you can't do that with a running back. If the defense has a great front seven that just shuts down the run, you can't move the running back into the slot and hand the ball off to him there, right? He's got to somehow, your line has to dominate their line somehow. So that's another thing people don't realize. Like when you play this style, when you go with these early running or these early wide receivers and then take these running backs late, you have no problem cutting your losses, right? No problem. Like if Saquon Barkley comes out of the gate and struggles week 3 or week 4, are you cutting Saquon Barkley? Are you benching Saquon? What are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? Whereas if Marshawn Lynch comes out and sucks, I'm like, okay, fine, get on my bench. I'll put somebody else in. It's no big deal. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm totally fine with Marshawn Lynch as my RB1.
Yeah, that's another way to look at it too. I mean, you look at this running back group, you say, well, it's pretty risky, right? There's no sure thing here, but overall, this team might actually be the safest because you have those 3 receivers, like you said, they're going to keep you afloat every week, along with the tight ends, or should be at the very least a top 5 fantasy producer. So overall, it's pretty safe because you might want to mixing and matching running backs anyways, unless you happen to hit on the guy, one of those top 5 or 6, yeah, maybe they will wind up being one of those bell cows like, Gurley was last year, David Johnson the year before. But unless you're sure you have a guy like that, you're still risking it anyways. Even someone like Christian McCaffrey, he's not a week in, week out, guy who's going to necessarily give you, a sure RB1 performance. So, all right, let's move on now to the B League. And let's see, as far as other teams, we're not just going to talk about Raf's team, although I know he would love and appreciate that. So let's talk about what we have up here. And you can see all our teams that we have listed. As you see the board, so let me ask you this first thing, Chris. Let's talk about Raf's team. I know I said it wouldn't happen, but we'll talk about his first. So one thing that I didn't mention to him is I like Zeke not at the number 4 spot. I like Zeke at the number 1 spot, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago too, didn't we? I think he has the potential to be the number 1 player in all of fantasy because they're going to get him more involved in the pass game. So, Gurley, it's probably going to be the number 1 pick in most drafts, or Lev Bell, it's going to be one of those 2. David Johnson is even going ahead of Zeke. So, what do you think about taking Zeke at number 4?
No, I agree. I like Zeke a lot, and I personally I dislike Zeke. He's a cowboy. He he runs through holes that are as wide as my bedroom here, and gets up and does this like he was the man. All he did is run in a straight line and get tackled, and he gets up going like this. I strongly dislike Zeke, but I agree with you. I think he's in a great spot. I think the Cowboys are going to try to play kind of what we saw from Jacksonville last year. Not that their defense is as good, not nearly as good, although it's good. But I think they're just gonna feed Zeke. I think he's gonna be the offense. I already talked about last year. He was on pace for I think 387 carries had he played all 16 games. I think he could see 400 this year, which would only be the 6th time that's ever happened in the NFL. I've tweeted it out. I've talked about it. I really think that's going to happen, and I think he could be looking at 40 to 50 catches on top of that, which isn't a huge number, but when you have 400 carries, it's a huge number. It's a huge number, and we could be looking at just an all-time season from Zeke. There is some concern that the offense won't be as good. He may not get as many scoring chances, but with that kind of volume, I think he can make up for it. So yeah, I love this pick a lot.
Absolutely. I'm really starting to buy more into the narrative of these teams that are going to try to run the ball more to protect their quarterback. And I put Barkley as part of that because I really think, to some extent, Eli Manning got just exposed so much because they had 0 running game. I mean, it was horrible. Of course, they had 0 receivers also. I think they're really going to make an effort to run the ball. I think it's, they took Barkley there for a reason, right? So, kind of like you already mentioned, we see Barkley here going again at number 6. I'm totally on board with that. I'm the type who I'm a little bit risk averse in the first, second round. I'm not going to just jump all over a rookie typically. With Barkley, I think I'm throwing all that in the window because, kind of like with Fournette last year, we know they're going to run the ball as much as humanly possible. And that's why I'm coming around on the Penny thing too, Rashad Penny. I'm not as convinced that Seattle's going to run it that much. And I'm also not 100% convinced that he's going to be the only guy. Not that I'm believing the Chris Carson preseason hype talk or anything like that. But, he has to prove that he can be that guy. With Barkley, I don't have, quite so many doubts. Penny blew it out in the combine, but still. Combine's the combine. He's coming out of San Diego State. So it's not quite the same as playing in the Big Ten. So a little bit different here. We see Antonio Brown did get taken, and it's kind of surprising here. It was Laura Michaels who took him because in our baseball expert mock that we did, that I was a part of a few months ago, Laura Michaels was the guy taking all the risks. He took Chris Davis out of Oakland in round 2, I think, and everyone was like, "Whoa, that's what are you doing?" That was the big, it was the big surprise there. He was the one swinging for the fences. And he was like, "Yeah, whatever." And so he took kind of the safe route here, took Antonio Brown. Look at his next pick.
Yeah.
Round
We just
2.
talked about Alex Collins in the 3rd.
What do you
Now
think
he's
about Alex
second.
Collins in the 2nd?
I don't know what to think of that. I mean, I don't know. You got to really be high on Alex Collins. I don't know. There's no way. I don't know. I don't.
There's no
Can't take him
words.
over. I can't take him over Jordan Howard. That's for sure.
Yeah, Howard, you went over Rashad Penny. That's one thing. The two rookies there, Ronald Jones, he took next. But over Jordan Howard, that's a surprise. I'm pretty sure. I'm assuming this is a full PPR, if not half PPR. But yeah, Alex Collins, a second rounder. Now, if you look at this, was a pretty RB heavy first 2 rounds, as you see. Even though we did have Antonio Brown a little bit earlier, you have, was it 6, 7, 8, 9 in the first round? That's kind of what we're seeing, right? Pretty much 9 first rounders will be running backs. And then you had 6 more running backs taken, and then you have Alex Collins. Fear of missing out on Alex Collins, I guess.
Well, like I said, if in a redraft format like this, I'm going to reach on guys that I really like, and we don't really have a lot of ADP data yet on for redraft because leagues haven't really started drafting too much yet. So, but yeah, I
Yeah,
don't like Alex Collins that much
yeah.
personally.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move on from that. Let's see what else. Then we have nothing too shocking in the first round. Now, I don't see any team that went really, really running back heavy like the team that we just mentioned. Nobody took more than 2 in the first 3. There's only one team I can see that obviously made a concerted effort here to go 0 RB, and that would be the CBS Sports team with Heath Cummings, who's also part of our baseball draft I just mentioned, and Chris Towers, their team. So is it a coincidence that in this 0 RB team we have Julio Jones again? AJ Green, I think great value in the second round. Larry Fitzgerald in the third, and then Jarvis Landry in the fourth. So let's compare this team to Mike Clay's, for example. What do you think about this team?
I like this team a lot too. I like Fitzgerald more than Diggs, but I I would have I would have loved this team if they had done 2 things different. But of course, this is personal preference, right? We all have our guys. I would prefer, as much as I like AJ Green, I would have preferred Keenan Allen. I just think this year there's everything is there for Keenan Allen. Not the AJ Green. AJ Green, we know what AJ Green is going to give you, but I think Keenan Allen has more upside than AJ Green this year. With the nine, and I think he's got just as safe as a floor. And I would have preferred probably Golden Tate, maybe Alshon Jeffrey, one of those 2 over Jarvis Landry. I just don't like. I haven't really been drafting much Jarvis Landry this year. I'm just really worried about that. You've got Duke Johnson there. You got Josh Gordon. You got Jarvis Landry. You got Carlos Hyde, who caught 1,000 passes last year. You got Nick Chubb now. I just don't. He's not going to get 100, however many targets. He's not going to get 100 plus catches. And if he loses 20 to 30 catches, unless his role completely changes, which who who is he going to supplant? Is he going to supplant? Is he going to play on the outside over Corey Coleman? He's not going to play on the outside over Josh Gordon. Yeah, I just don't. I don't see it. But I think if they had, for me personally, and I'm not trying to knock anybody's picks because these are experts. But for me personally, Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, Larry Fitzgerald, and then say probably Golden Tate because give me somebody as my wide receiver 4 who gives me like a pretty safe floor. You know, I think that would have been an incredible start. That's a start that I could every time I would take that 100 out of 100.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm big on Golden Tate. Not that he's going to have, far superior stats this season, but as far as where he's going, what you're going to get in return, I like him better as a fourth round pick. Alshon Jeffrey too. So totally agree with what you just said. Um, as far as the running backs that they took later on, then you see the first running back on this team, the CBS team, was round 6, Carlos Hyde. I've personally never been a fan of Carlos Hyde, so there's that. Um, but then there's Rex Burkhead, Duke Johnson, another zero RB favorite, got him in round 8. And then Gio Bernard, Theo Riddick, some of those pass catching backs, DeMarco Murray. I really like DeMarco Murray, taking a chance on him as like your 5th running back because, again, potential for a big role, and you're not investing too much to take him. So I really would much rather have him than, for example, the guy who went right after him was Kenneth Dixon. Kenneth Dixon might not even make the team this year because they don't need him because they had Alex Collins. But no, there's rumors that Dixon might not even make the squad. So I'd much rather take a chance on a guy who could have a big role and does still have something left in the tank. So, yeah, again, it's not me. I'm not zero anything. I don't know that I could go that long without a running back necessarily. I want somebody better than Carlos Hyde, but those top 3 receivers, I mean, you just can't ignore Julio Jones, AJ Green, Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, that's talk about floor.
You'd have 3 wide receiver ones right there. So that's where this is where I say this could be the year where zero RB makes, I guess, a comeback in the sense that we could come out of 2018 and we could go into 2019 and people are talking about zero RB being a viable strategy again. Because if you can draft, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if a running back is giving you the points or the wide receiver is giving you the points, right? Points are points. So if you're looking at potentially, RB 20 or wide receiver 8, you got to take wide receiver 8, right? You can't just take RB 20 because you need a running back. You're just giving up too many points, right? You're giving up way too many points, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. Like, if you're deciding between, Larry Fitzgerald or who is the next running back off the board, or Sonny Michel. I mean, sure, Sonny Michel could be good, or JHI, maybe JHI could be good. You're talking about a guy who's just been a wide receiver 1 consistently. I don't think you could pass on Larry Fitzgerald to take one of those guys just to be like, I got a running back. Okay, I need a running back, right? Like, that's where I'm saying I'd rather just wait and take these guys. Not that these are the guys I probably would have taken, but I mean, I like these guys. And then just try to figure it out as the season goes on and let my 3 potential wide receiver 1s carry me, especially early in the year. And if I can then improve my running back position, if I can catch up a little bit to the rest of the league at the running back position, I'm probably going to just dominate my league, right? Because I'm rolling out 3 wide receiver 1s every week, and if I can get a couple 12 in the run, if I can get 2 running backs that are in that like 12 to 15 range, or even like maybe like 13 to 18 range that I can roll out every week with 3 wide receiver 1s, I'm going to be really tough to beat.
Absolutely. And like you said, round 4, about that time, you take a running back there, just to have one, say, okay, I need a running back. You're either taking a rookie, someone who's in a committee, like Derrick Henry, or someone who's got some level of risk, either through injury or whatever, someone like JHI who's got he wasn't injured last year, but he's got great potential to be injured with that knee. Chris Thompson coming off a knee injury, somebody like that, someone like Tevin Coleman, who he's a pass catching back, but nothing more. So why not take a guy who is going to get a lot more action? Jarvis Landry, safe pick is okay, but like I said, he's definitely not going to get the target share that he did in Miami. But that still, and you look at that team also, just to finish out there, got Russell Wilson as their quarterback. So kind of knocked out the park at the quarterback and receiver position. Mixed and match running back, kind of punted on tight ends. But if you're not taking a tight end early, then again, why take one just for the sake of taking one in the first few rounds? You might as well wait. Take a guy like Charles Clay. All right, give me another team that stands out to you in any way, a team that you like as far as balance or as far as value. What's a team that you think kind of has a chance to win this B League, um, move up to the A League next year?
I would say I think my favorite team is probably boy. I actually really like Raf's team. Believe it or not, apart from that Devontae Parker pick, if he could have picked anybody else there, I probably would like it more. But I think he has a solid team and the Andrew Luck pick. I don't understand. I feel like there's no, especially at this point, if we knew for sure Andrew Luck was playing, okay, fine. But quarterback position is so deep this year. I mean, it seems like every year it gets deeper and deeper, at least in terms of fantasy, right? I mean, you could be picking guys like look at guys. I mean, I'd be fine with Alex Smith. I'd be fine with Matt Ryan. I mean, I'd be fine with Phillip Rivers. I'm guessing this is before the Jameis Winston suspension. I'd probably be fine with him anymore. Guys like Stafford, I love Stafford, and he's going. He's in round 9 here. You can get him so late. Big Ben in round 10, Cam Newton in round 9. I mean, it's so deep this year at quarterback, and you can even go deeper than that if you're fine with streaming, right? There's going to be so many, I think, good streaming candidates this year. If you just really want to punt the position and just grab somebody in the one of the last rounds. I like his team a lot, and I also like who is this? This is Adam Wexler and Johnny. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Hilleber.
Hildebrand, maybe. Yeah.
I like their team. I like that start. I like that DeAndre Hopkins, Christian McCaffrey. I think Christian McCaffrey gives you a nice safe floor. I like Kenyon Drake. I'm starting to like Kenyon Drake more and more. I don't see who he's going to lose touches to. Who is he going to lose touches to? You're a Dolphins guy. Who is Kenyon Drake going to lose touches to?
Well, they did bring in Frank Gore. He's got something left in the tank. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be like a 50-50 timeshare, but I think Gore will spell him. I don't think they want to, pound Drake too much into the ground because he's not a big back. He's not a guy who I think they even expected when they drafted him to ever be a featured back. I think they thought he would be more of a complimentary guy. So now that said, you don't need 20 plus carries to bring good value if you're ripping off big runs, which he did toward the end of last year. Um, yeah, I'm okay with Drake at that point. I don't love him. Again, I don't trust him just because, again, I was a Dolphin. I know better. But yeah, if you get him in the right spot, I'd prefer him more like around 4. But really, if you look at the other running backs that went after him, it was Mark Ingram and there was nobody. It was Sonny Michel. So I would take Drake over Michel.
Yeah, and I like their receivers. I like Crowder there in the middle. I like Aguilar there in the middle. I like Sterling Shepard. I don't like taking a defense that early, but they got to go in at least. So I think that team has some potential. But I like Ralph's team a lot actually.
All right, well, we're gonna save it
Pretty
for
solid.
last, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about Raf's team now. I did give him some hell for Devontae Parker pick.
Yeah, I don't.
The main thing, of
You won't.
course, is Andrew Luck, and not. Here's the worst part: is he took Andrew Luck. Okay, fine. He backed him up with Blake Bortles, so that's his quarterback combo. And he said, here's his reasoning because he thought he was gonna get Derek Carr as his backup, which would have been much better, but he didn't want to wait on his Austin Safarian Jenkins pick. And so he waited one round too long. He missed Derek Carr, and then he panicked and took Bortles. Is that excusable?
No, sorry, Raph, it's not excusable. Like I said, in the quarterback climate we're in now in a one QB league, I'll let somebody else pick Andrew Luck, and if he comes back and he's healthy and he's top 5 quarterback again, I'll say oh well because again he could have gotten Ben Roethlisberger, he could have gotten Phillip Rivers here, and these are guys that post top 12 quarterback numbers year in year out. Yeah, they're a little more of a headache, right? You might have to deal with some. Like Ben Roethlisberger is going to give you some crappy weeks where you're like, oh, that really sucked. And Phillip Rivers might give you some crappy weeks. But these are guys you can roll with every single week. Just leave them in your lineup. Don't worry about it. And it's not a position that's going to make or break your league, right? You're not going to if your quarterback pick in a one quarterback league cost you your championship, then you messed up somewhere else, right? Like your quarterback pick in a 1 QB league should not really affect you, even if you miss, even if you whiff, even if you pick. Like last year, I took Big Ben in the league I won my championship in, and he started terrible to start the season. He was giving me like 6 points, 7 points. He had that 5 interception game where he gave me like -4 or whatever it was. I finally just cut him, and I picked up Jared Goff or whoever it was, right? I mean, it just seems like in a one quarterback league, there's always quarterbacks on the waiver wires you can just grab. You can even just stream, right? You can say this guy has a good matchup this week. Let me throw him in. This guy has a good matchup. So yeah, I don't like that pick. I would have preferred Roethlisberger or even Philip Rivers personally. I think Philip Rivers is one of those guys like Stafford that gets no love in fantasy land, but every year he posts top 12 numbers. He's one of those guys you can just set him in your lineup and not worry about it every single week.
Yeah, I mean, people forget we mentioned this a few weeks ago. Philip Rivers was second in the league in passing yards. He's barely behind Tom Brady last year. So definitely a much safer pick. And we talked about this with MFL Todd. You know, the strategy of potentially pairing up kind of a safer quarterback with someone who's more boom bust. When you put them both as boom bust and like as boom bust as you can get, like a guy who may or may not play the season, and like Bortles, yeah, that's not the best strategy. Had he, secured Carr at that spot, but here's what I don't get. Like, I'm big on Jenkins too, Safarian Jenkins. I think he's kind of a good sleeper pick at tight end. He didn't need to worry about his backup tight end. He had Delaney Walker. He had like the safest pick already. Like he didn't have to worry about who he's backing up at tight end. So
I agree with you.
um, anyways, that's what happens. Overall, I do like his team. Nice trio of running backs there. And his receivers, had he replaced Parker with literally anybody else that went in the round, then I would have been much happier with it. I'll give him a shot, though. If Andrew Luck comes back and he's the Andrew Luck of old, hey, you never know. He could have a chance. Raf did finish second last year. He's hoping to take the trophy this year and move on up.
So is that how it works? The whoever wins the B League moves up, and whoever finishes last in the A League moves down.
That's exactly right. Relegation. So I think it's just one. I think it's just one team. Just the winner gets to move up. So he was a little disappointed. He finished second, hoping to take the trophy this year. We'll see if that happens. I give him a 49% chance.
That's pretty good. Let's say in a 12-team league, that's pretty high.
That's pretty good. All right.
It's interesting though to see these drafts because they're so different than how the MFLs go. I mean, wow. Like, Ronald Jones is in the MFLs is like a 6th, 7th rounder.
Well, and yeah, I think part of that is in these standard
I
drafts.
have to really. Oh, go ahead.
Well, we talk about running back, of course, being more of a priority. If you miss out on one of these, starting guys, you have a guy like Jones who isn't necessarily guaranteed to be a workhorse back, but a guy who has the potential to be, right? He doesn't really have a lot of competition. I think there's a lot more fear of missing out on the running backs this year, which again, conversely, might lead to a great opportunity to just ignore running back and then pile them up later. But I think we're going to see running backs more and more, even as we get closer to the season, just go earlier and earlier. You don't have to worry too much about that in best ball because you're not too much worried about week to week because you have a guy who goes off maybe 3 or 4 times in a year. That's going to pay off for you. You know what I mean? So people are trying to get more of a sure thing, chasing totals as opposed to like weekly potential. So. Now, is that a better strategy? Not necessarily, because even a league like this where you set weekly lineups, it's still week to week, and you're gonna have to mix and match. Ronald Jones isn't guaranteed to do anything this year. We don't know. We haven't seen him play, so I'm starting to, like I said, I'm never gonna be a zero RB guy, but I feel less dependent on the need to have a top 10 running back. You know what I mean? Going into the first or the second round. So I don't know.
I think, and this is kind of what I've seen in the MFLs. Although I'll vary a little bit more in the MFLs. I won't. I've only have out of all my drafts, believe it or not, in MFLs, I've only done 1 0 RB draft so far. And technically, it wasn't even a 0 RB draft. I just went wide receiver with my first 4 picks. But I had the 12th pick, and I started Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, and then when it came back to round to me, Larry Fitzgerald and Stephon Diggs were still on the board. And I was like, I can't take any of the running backs that were there over those guys. I just couldn't. So, but other than that, I don't have any zero RB teams in my MFLs. Um, but I think we're gonna see this, or like you said, we're gonna see even people at the end of drafts in redraft leagues still reaching on running backs. Like they're gonna see Julio Jones on the board, and they're gonna see Leonard Fournette, and they're gonna want Leonard Fournette. They're gonna see Michael Thomas on the board, and they're gonna see Dalvin Cook, and they're gonna say, "Give me Dalvin Cook," because it's a running back, right? Because it's a running back. Never mind that these guys are potentially top 5 at their position, and you're looking at running backs that are kind of back end RB1s, right? Maybe even high end RB2s. You don't know. Um, but looking at this, if you can get one of those top 4 guys that I've talked about before, like Gurley, Bell, Johnson, and Zeke, I think you got to take a running back there. But after that, I think you're going to find a lot of value at the wide receiver position. And if you're in your redraft league, your season long league, and you're drafting towards the back, you might want to think about, maybe you don't have to go zero RB. I mean, obviously, if it comes to your turn, and there's a running back there that you really like, take him. But there's going to be so much value at the wide receiver position towards the back of drafts and coming around that early, in the early second, that I think not taking a running back till the 3rd round or even beyond is going to be a really good strategy this year.
Yeah, and this is why it's important to look not just. It's interesting to see where these experts and some of these guys that we follow online and we know from the most reputable websites that there are. Not just interesting to see where their mind is at and what they're doing, but every draft, whether it's a mock draft with a bunch of guys you've never seen before, MFL 10, any kind of data that you get, it's all information that you can process, and it's going to help you kind of develop your theory. Because that's what we're here to do. Not to tell you who to pick where, you have to make that decision for yourself. But the more information you have is, as far as what other people are doing and other people are thinking, that's going to help you to develop your own strategy and see if you want to zig where others are zagging, or try to jump, ahead of somebody and get a guy that you think might not be available on the turn. Maybe you're big on Alex Collins. You don't want to wait till the 3rd round. You take him now, and then maybe that pays off. So, all right. So it was interesting to take a look at those mocks there. I'm sorry, not mocks. Those actual draft boards. I'm getting distracted because I'm trying to mess around with our settings here. All right. Yeah, I gotta make sure that people see us. There we go. All right. Let's get rid of Zeke there. We don't like Zeke. So, Chris, hope you feel better. I know you fought through it. You were listed day to day, but you were probable for this pod, and you fought your way through it, and you had a full workload. So, congrats on that.
Well, good thing this is a football pod and not a baseball pod, because if it was a baseball pod, I'd probably be out for the season. So.
Oh, there we go. Cheap shot. That was a lot. It was like a meatball there. No, you'd just be on the 10-day DL. It's 10 days.
Okay, 10-day DL with like a splinter or what? Like
with a mild viral infection or whatever.
Yeah, like a runny nose. 10-day DL with a runny nose.
Yeah, like you cut yourself shaving. You're like, okay, no. Hey, they're tough. I couldn't do that. It's easy for us to say, right? We're here on the radio. But thanks, sir, for fighting through it, and it was good to be back. Tell you, hopefully, we never miss another week again without podcasting. So I'll make sure we can transmit on location or something like that, especially now that we got our new setup here.
I agree.
All right, so the last thing to figure out is what are we going to do next week? We've talked about these expert drafts. We've talked about the fish bowl. We've done plenty of best ball stuff. So we're going to have to think about something, and I have some ideas brewing. But the next thing we're going to do is work on some guests. So we have a few guests that have been lined up. We had some technical difficulties. Things happened. Had to travel. So don't what am I going to say? Don't wait before tuning in, because we're going to have some more guys that we've promised will be on. I know we have Anthony Staggs lined up. Scott Fish, hopefully, if we get a chance. I know he's a crazy busy guy, but hopefully he'll have some time for us. The Gridiron Scholar, John Lobb, I know at some point he's got to rejoin us to talk about more of these rookies now that they actually have landing spots. So we have plenty of guests that are going to join us. We do some more best ball talk. What else, Chris? What else we can talk about?
I don't know, but we need to fill this listener league.
That's right. I'm glad you mentioned that. So, guys, I think we might have some spots left. Check out our Twitter feed. Of course, that's at Fantasy Bomb Pod. We have an MFL 10 league, listener league. You can compete against us and Phil Clark, who actually helped us do our best ball rankings. He's making an appearance too. He's part of that league. So you can
Awesome.
actually take on some of Rotoballer's best and brightest. Yes, I'm including myself in that group. So, yeah, guys, check out our Twitter link. We'll retweet that out again the next coming day or two. You can check out also the Rotoballer at Rotoballer Twitter feed. They're going to retweet that too. So, just join us. Take our money, right? Chris is already spending it. He's already got a shopping cart full on Amazon. He thinks he's got your money in his pocket already.
Absolutely.
All right, so thanks for listening. This has been the Fantasy Bomb. We'll be back with you next week again. Of course, as always, check out rotoballer.com. Fantasy football, fantasy baseball, if you're into that kind of thing. Basketball, hockey. Guys, we have everything you could possibly imagine. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.